4 years ago, exactly, in February of 2013, Angelina Jolie, this wonderful and talented American actress, has undergone an operation to remove her 2 breasts. 2 years later, in March of 2015, she has undergone another operation, now to remove her 2 ovaries. Why did she do it? She did it because her mother, her aunt, the sister of her mother, and her grandmother died successively from 2 diseases, breast cancer and ovarian cancer. And she suspected that she is carrying a gene that, when mutated, is resulting in these diseases. And the gene is called BRCA1, breast cancer number 1. She has undergone a genetic test, and she was found indeed to be positive for the mutated gene. What did she do? Practically, personally, she removed a ticking bomb from her body that was ought to explode. 80% ought to explode, 80% chances of getting breast cancer, and 40%, which is very high, chances of getting ovarian cancer, which we all know is a deadly disease. What did she do publicly and maybe unknowingly? She ushered in the 3rd revolution of medicine, which we all call now the revolution of personalized or precise medicine. What is personalized? She, Angelina Jolie, has the mutation. Not all women that have breast cancer have this mutation. Actually, rather a small group. So that's personal. Precise because we are able to diagnose exactly the mutation that lead to those 2 diseases. Actually, this revolution, the 3rd revolution, have additional 3 Ps. 2 we talked already about, personal, personalized, and precise. The additional 3 are predictive. We can predict the disease. Actually, she knew that she is going to have the disease in the future. And therefore, she can prevent the disease by taking the appropriate measures. And last but not least, the participatory part. Gone are the days that the doctor is the patron of our body. The patient himself or herself takes responsibility for his or her own fate. You can imagine the weight of the disease for this woman or any woman to remove the womanhood, the symbol of womanhood, from her body. By that, she truly ushered this revolution. What is a revolution? In general, revolution is a paradigm shift. We are changing the way that we have behaved until now in a radical way. Why revolutions are coming in science and anywhere? 1, because we are not satisfied with what we are doing, and 2, the technology allows us to move forward. We need these 2 conditions, the dissatisfaction and the technology that will be on our side in order to move forward. But let's go back a little bit. It all starts with a dream. At the end of the day, we are running by dreams. To remain young forever, to remove the word aging from our vocabulary, and most importantly, to cure all diseases, to live young and healthy, and to remove even this fearful disease from our world. Is this dream possible at all? Well, when we look into history, I can tell you that we are doing, or we have done, the first steps. Whether we shall be able to make the next steps is still doubtful. Let's think about history a little bit. 100 years ago, at the turn of the 20th century, people lived on the average 50 years, 55 years. People died of infections, of bubonic plague, of polio, of cholera. Women died during delivery. In order for a family to have 2 children, the woman has to give birth to 10 children, to 7 children. Nowadays, we can raise 1 single child with 1 birth. In 1 century, we were able to increase lifespan by 30 years. Let's take this number even further down the road. Let's think about the Romans, the Egyptians, the Greeks. 4,000 years ago, people were living on the average 25 to 30 years. It took 4,000 years in order to increase lifetime by merely 20 years. And all of a sudden, one single magic century, the 20th century, 30 more years were added to our lives. And we are still keep on climbing. What happened in the 20th century? Many things did happen in the 20th century, mostly science and technology. Vaccination. We removed all the epidemics from our lives. Polio was gone. Cholera was gone. Bubonic plague was gone. Pertussis was gone. Antibiotics. We are able to fight infections. Imaging. Engineering came to our help. Initially Röntgen, but then CT scan and MRI. We can now follow from the outside of the body actions from the very outside by using very sophisticated devices. And we are still keep on running. Very soon we shall be able to replace tissues. Now we are doing it with metals. We can replace joints, we can replace heart valves, but very soon we shall be able to use soft tissues. Once we shall have diabetes, when the pancreas doesn't secrete any more insulin, we shall take embryonic cells, reprogram them to resecrete insulin, and put them back into the patient. And for those of you who are not aware, diabetes is the #1 epidemic of the Western modern world. For patients that are suffering from Parkinson's disease, this disease that we are trembling, that we cannot stabilize our organ, we cannot write, we cannot eat, we cannot cut our food, we cannot button our shirts, we cannot dry ourselves after the shower. We shall be able to take the brain cells that secrete this stabilizing material and have gone already, have been degenerated, reprogram embryonic cells to resecrete this material, put them back into the patient, and move on. So it's science, technology, and medicine. But along with it is coming the typical device that we have been used forever, and these are the drugs that we are buying in the pharmacy. And now we are entering the third revolution, as I mentioned to you, but let's go back a little bit to the first revolution. And the first revolution was the revolution of serendipity. Those drugs, blockbuster drugs, were discovered by complete serendipity. Think about aspirin. Aspirin initially was used to remove fever and to remove pain, but now aspirin is #1 drug to prevent heart attack, to prevent coagulation of blood in the arteries that lead blood to the heart itself, which cause us to just drop dead from a heart attack, God forbid. #1 preventer of heart attacks. It's #1 preventer now of cancer. Without going into too sophisticated mechanism, aspirin is now #1 chemopreventive drug to prevent many types of cancer. How aspirin was discovered? By the old Egyptians, 4,000 years ago. The leaves of the willow bark, Etz ha'arava, that grew up on the banks of the Nile River, were very bitter to chew, but the Egyptians noted that while chewing them, you can relieve pain. Then it took 4,000 years. Bayer in Germany developed the drug to become initially against fever and inflammation, and only 10, 20 years ago to become the best anticoagulant and best chemopreventive for cancer. Think about penicillin, the first antibiotic. I cannot imagine the world of medicine today without antibiotics. Penicillin was discovered by complete serendipity by Sir Alexander Fleming, a British scientist that noted that fungi and bacteria cannot grow together. There is always a distance between the two of them when they grow on the same dish. And he surmised that the fungus secretes a material that he called anti against bios, life. It was all serendipitous observation that really saved millions and millions of lives during the recent history. So the first revolution, serendipity. You trust me that we cannot live on serendipity when we are trying to cure diseases. Serendipity, you know, either it comes or it doesn't come. The second revolution was the revolution of chemistry and what we called high-throughput screening. Let me just explain it to you in a very simple language. There are numerous chemicals available today, millions of different chemicals that were synthesized during different processes. And on the other hand, we developed very simple model for diseases. We can have cells that secrete cholesterol, which will mimic heart attack. We can have cancer cells that grow in the dish that mimic cancer. And we can just match the two. We take one chemical after the other chemical, and try them one by one until one will stop the growth of the tumor. Imagine that you are leaving home and forget the key behind you. What you are doing, you are calling the company, and the company typically, in the old days, would have come with 1,000 or 500 keys. One of them will open the door. Why? Because the company is making so many keys. So did evolution made so many shapes that one of them will be fitted by a typical chemical. So this was half a serendipity. This was what I call non-intelligent screening, but many very useful drugs were discovered by this method. Statins, for example, the blockbuster drug that is sold by billions of dollars a year to reduce the level of cholesterol for patients that are suffering from high cholesterol that lead to heart attack, was discovered by this type of screening. A Japanese scientist by the name of Akira Endo just screened a library, we call it a library, of 100,000 chemicals, natural products coming from Japan, and he found one of them that will lower the production of cholesterol, and shortly after, it became a blockbuster drug. So why not to screen and screen and screen and screen until we find cure to all diseases? Well, we cannot do it. The reason is that we are human beings. We are doing it, screening is carried out on simple disease models. And human beings are much more complex than these simple disease models. We are men and women, we are tall and low, we are fat and a little bit, or big, to be politically correct, and thin. We are living in different climates, but mostly we are equipped with a different genetic repertoire. We cannot even transfuse blood to one another. We have 8 types of bloods. We need to be sure that we are transfusing the same very type of blood to a patient in the operation theater. Not to say transplanting a kidney, that's 1 to 1 million. Not to say transplanting bone marrow, this is 1 to 10 million. And we need to make matching. So we are very different from one another. Therefore, there is no wonder that diseases behave very different in us. The same so-called disease will behave very different in different people. If we take a group of people that is diagnosed in the same day with prostate cancer, man, breast cancer, woman, Alzheimer's, doesn't matter what, any disease, and we follow them along the time, we see that they split. Some of them are cured, and some of them either remain chronic patients or, unfortunately, pass away. They split. And the question is, how do we know? How can we predict what's going on there? How we can tell the patient, or how we can better treat the patient that we know is going to belong to the worsening group via the DNA. Now we have a chip that we can diagnose on the chip the exact mutation, the exact cause that leads to the disease. And what happened is that a new world discovered for us. What we call breast cancer is not a disease anymore. It's actually a group of numerous diseases that are caused by numerous mutations. What we call prostate cancer, heart attack, excess of cholesterol, any disease is actually just a name for a symptom. Let me just use a very simple example. Take a car that you cannot ignite in the morning. Well, that's the symptom, that's the disease. But the reason can be an empty battery, the reason can be wet sparks, the reason can be, God forbid, that you forgot to fill oil into the engine and the cylinders got stuck in their barrels. And it can be just simple, you forgot to fill it with gas. There is no gas in there. So there is a cause. If you take a car that doesn't have a battery and change the sparks, it will still not turn on. So think about the diseases, the same very problem. And the problem is that our ability to read the information came out only in 2000, exactly in April of 2000. The human genome, what makes us what we are, was become available only in 2000. It was a huge multinational effort that took $700 million, $700 million, and 7 years of work. And within the last 15 years, or 16 years, from 2000 until now, we were able to shrink the distance from $700 million to less than $5,000, and from 7 years to about an hour. We are able now to sequence the DNA of each and every one of us within an hour or two with a cost of $5,000, and within a year or two, this will be reduced even to $500. Basically a CAT scan, MRI, a little bit routine, on the little bit expensive side of the routine. That's the achievement of medicine. And what it brings with us? It brings with us exactly the third revolution, the revolution of personalized medicine. And the revolution of personalized medicine is, of course, embedded in our DNA, but not only in our DNA. You know, the DNA is just the beginning, it's the root. DNA is making RNA, and RNA is making proteins. And we're now developing in parallel a whole set of technologies which are called omics, the genomics, the transcriptomics, the metabolomics, and we are able to profile each and every one of us with the exact profile that will pinpoint to the reason of the disease. But here comes the price that we have to pay for this lunch that until a few minutes ago you all thought it's free. There are no free lunches. And there are many prices for this lunch. One price is obviously the pharma companies. They hate it because the same market of breast cancer will be now divided to 10 different breast cancer, and so for prostate cancer and for every other disease, and they will have to develop many more drugs for the same market share. So economically, they don't like it. Until now, they enjoyed what we call the market of the blockbusters. They sold drugs for billions of dollars, even though the drug didn't help the patients or help them only mildly. But what could they do? That's the only drug that was for choice for them. So you take it and you say, okay, even the little may help. So this is one issue, but the other issue is the ethical issue. And the ethical issue is exactly the ethical issue that I pointed out with Angelina Jolie. It's the knowledge of what we are having. Do we want to know it? Don't we want to know it? Do we have a choice whether we want to know it or don't want to know it? Actually, we are not going to have a choice. It's going to be a routine test in the hospital. And I can tell you just one example, me. I'll tell you about myself. It's not a true one. You walk into the emergency room with a simple complaint of a chest pain, typical for heart attack. The doctor is making ECG, takes a blood test, tells you, no, Aaron, I'm happy to tell you that you don't have a heart attack, but you are carrying a gene that carries high susceptibility to Alzheimer's disease to evolve in 10 years. Wow. I walked into the emergency room for heart chest, for a heart attack, or to ruling out heart attack, or for chest pain, and here I'm walking out with a threatening, awful disease. What do I do with the information? Do I tell my wife? I believe that yes, of course. She's loyal to me. We have been married for a long time. But then, do I tell my employer? That's a much more complicated issue. And do I tell my insurance agent? Will he revoke my insurance? Well, that's another complicated issue. And the most complicated issue is, what do I tell my children? They may be carriers of the gene as well. And they are not me. They don't have families yet. They are in high school, just started dating a girlfriend or a boyfriend, just started a family. What they are going to do with this information? Well, I'm very optimistic. I'm very optimistic because if we think of the history of science and history at large, it's always the problem that preceded the solution. We cannot solve a problem without defining it first. And already here, we have a solution behind the scene. And the solution is another technology that is also problematic because every solution raises 10 more questions. And that's the old Hebrew saying that says, Marbe yeda, marbe deaga. The one who is more knowledgeable is also more troubled. And the solution is a technical solution that called CRISPR-Cas. I shall not go again into the technicalities, but we are able today to take a disease gene, a mutated gene, and with a pair of scissors, well, metaphoric scissors, cut it away, throw it out, and replace it with a healthy gene. Well, that looks like ideal, but it brings other problems. The other problems are what is a disease. A disease until now is something that is a situation that we cannot get up in the morning and go to work. We are feverish, we are weak, we cannot move, we call sick. A new disease may be that the woman is carrying, during a pregnancy, a blonde boy, and she doesn't like blonde hair. She wants the gene to be replaced with a black one, with a black hair boy. Well, that's not such a big problem. But think about manipulating genetic characteristics. Think about the huge power that we are going to have with this technique. But again, the beauty of it, that knowledge is endless. That's the beauty of knowledge. Knowledge just expands. There will be no day in our history that we shall know everything. On the contrary, the more we live, the less we shall know. And that will keep the challenge open forever. Thank you very much.